So my role is to moderate a panel of these very distinguished CEOs who are going to share their insights with us about what it takes to lead innovation. We want to discuss at least three topics. One is what makes leading innovation so difficult. Two is what do you need to know as a leader if in fact you do want to build an organization that can routinely innovate. What do you need to know? What do you need to do? Who do you need to be? And we also want to spend some time talking about how do we develop leaders who can do this. So I'd like to begin by asking each of our leaders who's with us today to describe a little bit of their innovation journey in their organization, and also in doing so share with us what they found most challenging about leading innovation. And I think we'll just do it in order here. And Vineet, if you would start, please, I'd appreciate it.
I'd like to, Linda, share two stories of innovation which I was personally involved in. One was set in context in 2005 to 2013. This is a legacy company called HCL Technologies, about 30,000 employees, losing mind share, market share, and talent share, and the board wanted to transform. And when we started asking the questions around in terms of how do we transform a company, we were very inspired with what Steve Jobs was doing in terms of the fact that he was looking at a completely different axis, not the technology axis, but the axis of experience, and saying, is there a different axis on which we can innovate and transform the company? And we fundamentally ask ourselves four questions. What is our core business, which is to create differentiated value for our customers? Where does this differentiated value get created? It gets created in the interface of the employee and the customer. Who creates it? The employee creates it. Hence, the most important question, what should the role of the management and the CEO be? And we came to a conclusion it should be in the business of enthusing, encouraging, enabling the employees to create the differentiated value. Hence was born the concept called employees first, customer second. The most difficult part of this was not coming up with an idea, but to execute it. The question is, how do you make employee first, customer second a living dream? How do you get people to buy in? And for that, you need to do something bold. And in that particular case, what I did was I asked 30,000 employees to do my appraisal, confidentiality. Pricewaterhouse audited that confidentiality survey, and the results were put out on the web for all to see. And I did that for 8 years, and any time the ranking will go down below 8, I will lose my job. So that is the way you demonstrate that you really mean that you want to put your eggs behind that innovation. The second is what I'm currently doing. I quit in 2013 to try and drive large-scale social change in India in the field of education. We have 144 million children in India. 82% of them in grade 5 cannot count beyond 99 or construct simple sentences. We have a demographic dividend, which soon will become a very big challenge. Me and my wife decided we dedicated our life to try and transform the lives of millions of children. We ask ourselves the same fundamental question: where does the learning outcome gets created? It gets created in the interface of the teacher and the child. Who creates the learning outcome? The teacher. What is the problem? The problem is the teacher is not educated, not motivated, does not show up in the class, and the children also have to work while they study. So how do we solve the problem? By igniting the classroom and making it very interesting. Who has done it before? Bollywood. If you see a Bollywood movie in a village, they will put poles there, they will put a sheet there, and they will forget about hunger, poverty, leakage, everything, and they will have an immersive experience. So we innovated to try and see if we can get Bollywood in the voice of Mary Poppins equivalent Sampark Didi, in an audio device which can be charged with dynamos on a cycle, because there is no electricity in villages. Bring that to the classroom and ignite the classroom. So we did that. We have 76,000 schools, 7 million children impacted under this program. What is the biggest problem? The biggest problem is the government doesn't get it. The government doesn't like it. But if you want to partner with them, you have to connect your innovation with votes. So what did we do? We did a village square English play called My Family. It was done in English. It was a 20-minute play. 2.3 million children stood on a village square and did that English play, and obviously the chief minister saw the votes coming in. So innovation, I think ideas are easier, but unless you take a big risk and execute them, I think it's not going to work.
So the challenge you see is in part being willing to take that risk. and
yes.
pursue the big bet.
I think innovation, Linda, is making an impossible possible. The reason something is impossible is because it is outside the boundaries of logic and reason of everybody else. But it is inside your boundaries of logic and reason. So when you explain an innovation, nobody will understand it because it is outside their boundaries of logic and reason. So unless an innovator is willing to take huge amount of risks and put all his might behind it and effectively communicate and connect the dots, instead of imagining that people will get it, the innovation will fail.
Thank you. So I will say that Vineet has been one of my research sites, and he put up with me observing him for many, many years and understanding what he's doing. And so one of my favorite cases is to teach the case on employee first, customer second. I'm sure that's something you might want to explore with him later, because we can have very big debates about that language. Language that was created by the young people. The young sparks came up with that language.
Sure.
And then you delegated them and had to live with it. So you
correct.
are a man who takes risks.
That is correct. And Linda, you rightly said, none of the innovations have been created by me.
No.
So the previous panel has rightly said that if you truly want innovation, you have to be able to ask the right question, and then the innovation comes in. And when the innovation comes up, then you have to throw all the buckets of water behind that innovation.
Yeah. One last piece is when Vineet did put his 360-degree feedback up on the intranet for all to see, I actually received a phone call from a magazine asking me if that was true. And indeed it was true. And as Vineet said, there was, quote, a dirty laundry up there. People weren't simply polite.
No.
Something about his culture. People are more than willing to tell you what you're not quite doing right.
That is
but
true.
Also willing to tell you what you are doing right. So it was a process of unleashing other people's talents, in part you being the role model for taking big risks so that they would also take some of those risks.
And Linda, one quick point. Was the risk worth it? In the end, HCL grew six-folds in revenue, profitability, and market cap in 7 years at the peak of recession. So, when you say, is the risk of the CEO opening up his appraisal to employees worth it, you have to see the reward which you are chasing.
That was one behavior, to illustrate that you had to learn and that you were willing to listen to other people.
Sure.
Yes. So, Peter, if you'd take us a little bit on your journey you've been on and what you found most challenging, or some of the challenges, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. It's great to be here. It's a great honor and pleasure, especially for a packaging and paper company. So Mondi is a packaging and paper company, and packaging and paper is normally not identified with innovation. So I really asked myself, maybe there was a misunderstanding when I was invited. But at least I can tell from our failures, and I think lately we're doing quite fine. Actually, we have two issues. So we listed on the London Stock Exchange mid of 2007, and if you had invested in us, you would have got about 7 times your original market value. But that was not because we're an innovative company. Actually, we do two things right. First, we are quite good in capital allocation, so when do we invest and when do we buy companies and which companies we buy. And our second strength is execution. So we buy companies, in many cases, in emerging markets, and we bring them in record time to, let's call, best standards, global standards in the world. Now, the problem we have with innovation is, first of all, that's not an innovation model. And the second thing is, as we are quite successful, many people say, so why should we do innovation? And if I think back on the statistics, why should we bet 250 ideas for 1 million in order to get 1 billion? We have a different way of doing it. But still, we realize we have to do innovation. So we started, the first start had to go wrong. That was the script. So a few years ago, we started a big innovation project. And our main question was, how can we get more sales, more profits, whatever? And I think, looking back now, and it took me several years to understand it, we did 3 things wrong. First of all, and again, it's Peter Drucker, we should have asked, what does the customer want? Not what is our ambition or our strive. Second, what job needs to be done? And we didn't ask really that. So what's our contribution, so to say, to society and to our customers? And the third question we didn't ask was, do we really create value? So it was all about coming up with cool ideas and doing something really novel, because we're not so used to doing really novel things. We're more the incremental improvers. So we wanted to do something really different. And it backfired. So 2 years ago then, because we are a company, we do it again and again. We exhaust all options which don't work, but finally we normally get at what does work. And so we started our digital project. So we heard today that no strategy without innovation and no innovation without digitalization. So we said digitalization has a big impact. And I think this time we got it a bit better, because we really identified the 3 things we want to concentrate on. One is we have to make a step up in terms of productivity and cost efficiency, because our customers want our packaging products to be, amongst others, simply cheaper. Secondly, we want to interact better with our customers, so we need to change maybe our B2B environment more in a B2C. And third, and this is what we were struggling with, is we had some ideas about new business models. And that worked somewhat better. I think then 1 year ago we launched, or half a year ago it's more, we launched a new thing which is called Eco Solutions. And that's now for the first time where I really feel comfortable about the progress we made. And it's very simple. The mission is very simple. Avoid plastics going to oceans, but avoid plastics altogether. And being a paper company, it's very logical to stand up and say, yeah, we have paper. What we all in our industry forget to say, but we don't give you the functionalities and we don't give you a lot of other things which you would expect from your packaging. And so it's not good enough to say, yeah, we are the big alternative, because you will not store your ham in your fridge in a paper box, because then you have to throw it away after 3 or 4 days. So how can you get the functionalities? And this is a fantastic project. With a very business unit-oriented structure, so divisional structure, and our teams work together. And the reason is, I think, is that they really have a mission now. So it's a very clear target. It is a rewarding target because it's good for our business, but it's also good for society. And we see a lot of enthusiasm, and we try to learn from all the mistakes we've done so far. So it's also a very value-focused approach, because also the value is not just our profit, but it's the value we contribute to society. And the last thing we are now doing, and this is not fully worked out, is our own incubator. And there, because our mindset is more this incremental thing, is there, this we will really, because we tried it several times, it never worked. Now we will really organizationally do it very, very, in a very, very separate organization, to make sure that all our processes, etc., which are optimized for execution, do not impede it. And yeah, if I'm invited again in 1 or 2 years, I can talk about if it worked or not.
So
Thank you.
So Peter was kind enough to let me meet his senior team, and we talked about both some of the things that haven't worked and the things that have. And for sure, partly what you've gone through may have been setting the stage for you to be prepared to do what you're doing so right now with that focus. But one of the things I found in my own research is, to the extent that you can define a mission that has a sense of purpose to it, and there's meaning to the work, people are more willing to engage in the emotionally and intellectually taxing work of changing and innovating. So as you talk about sustainability, moving away from plastics and moving to paper, you're also really tapping into people's hearts about what they want to do in terms of improving, as you said, society. So there's a focus in a couple of ways that comes there. I think the other thing that I would simply like to say is my work is I'm an ethnographer, so I'm an anthropologist, and I have studied exceptional leaders of innovation for a number of years with collaborators. And this issue of finding the purpose and the meaning of the work, which I think also needed to happen in your organization as well, Vineet, is really what helped provide the glue to get people to do work that is actually quite difficult to do and do in different ways. The other thing I just wanted to pick up on and maybe have you elaborate a bit more on is, as you've come to look at experience, both of you have talked about what's the experience, and you talked, we're a B2B business, but we're beginning to think more like a B2C business, also B2B business, but you all both have found the experience of the customer and connecting to that experience to be critical in driving your innovation. Is that a fair observation?
Yeah, that's a fair observation, and it's really because of digitalization. So all of a sudden we have the enabler, because otherwise to gather data from our millions of customers, so our products, even though they are not branded, because packaging, unfortunately, is only branded about in 10 cases, 10% of our products. Millions of people use it, but how do they use it, etc.? It's awfully difficult, and with digitalization, it's just much easier.
And it's helped you focus more on what does that customer need, knowing that customer,
yeah,
and creating product for that customer.
Yeah. But now the new bottleneck is now we can do some of that technically, but now we have to implement it into the mindset of the managers, because they were just not used to it for technical reasons. Now the technical solution exists, but that doesn't automatically change the mindset.
Yes. So for almost 20 years, I've been the chair of the Leadership Initiative at Harvard Business School, but this summer the dean has told me I have a new job, and that is to be the chair of a new group on leadership, organization, and digital transformation. So I'm very happy to learn about this, and the reason why some of my technology colleagues were like, why Linda? I think part of that was because it really is not just the technology, the solution, but the human solution, if you will, that goes along with that. So that's, I think we're going to hear more about that from our next speaker. Gisbert, if you would tell us about your journey and what you found most challenging about it.
Yeah, thanks very much. Is this on? Does it work? Yeah. Okay, yeah, they invited not only paper and packaging, they invited also steel. So they are, and Klöckner and Co. So I'm a CEO of a steel company, of a steel distribution company, and we started our digital transformation more than 4 years ago. And the reason was that in our core business we have huge overcapacities in Europe as well as in the US. Most of our products. Most of
I think it doesn't work.
Let me see. I think we may need to try that one. Yep.
Is it on?
Yeah, it's not working.
It's not working.
Does this work?
No.
Yeah?
Yep, okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, so most of our products are commodities, and with this it was very difficult to differentiate in the traditional way against competition, and at that point in time we then developed the idea of a platform for the steel and metals industry, a platform which connects all participants and which facilitates transactions with all participants. The problem was, so we first then tried to do it internally, but the problem was that this platform was also to a certain extent disruptive finally to our core business, because a platform typically moves itself between the customer and the company, and the platform, a successful platform, typically takes over also a certain amount of the margin. And this was very difficult to communicate internally, and therefore we first failed with our internal efforts to build such a platform. And then we launched about 4 years ago a company called Klöckner.ai. This is our digital hub. We did this in Berlin, by the way, so not close to our core, to our headquarters, and we did this also with different people. So we employ, meanwhile, by the way, more than 90 people within Klöckner.ai from 17 countries, and nearly all of them are what we call digital natives. And with this people, then we started to develop the first digital tools, and then the big effort was how to convince our people on the traditional side, in our core business, to use these tools, because Klöckner.ai was in the beginning very independent from Klöckner. We did it very independent because we were thinking only when we do it very independent, then we will be successful with such a digital hub. By the way, we also learned then to approach our customers differently, so we didn't ask our customers what they need. We went to our customers, we tried to find out what we can do better, how we can facilitate them to do the business with us better than before. So we didn't ask, we did this customer ideation. And then we started, by the way, with this lean startup approach. So we started with a prototype, and then we developed an MVP, and then this MVP was developed further together with our customers. But then the big issue was the transformation on the corporate side, because our people on the corporate side, for instance, when you want to sell steel through an online shop, then our salespeople had to accept this. And they didn't accept it in the beginning because they feared, of course, to lose their business. And when they not accepted it, they were also not were convincing the purchasing guy on the other side to use this kind of tools, because they fear to lose the job as well. And therefore we then moved Klöckner.ai a bit closer to Klöckner, and we started a lot of initiatives in our core company. So for instance, one initiative was a digital academy. In our company, every employee has a right to do unlimited digital courses during working hours. With this, we want to increase, or we increased already, I would say, the digital IQ of our people, and with this, of our company. We also started very early with a hierarchy-free communication. In our case, this is Yammer. This is some kind of an internal Facebook. And a lot of initiatives were driven through this internal Facebook, or through this hierarchy-free communication. With this, we were, of course, also faced with a lot of problems. For instance, our middle management was getting curious, because all of a sudden I was, for instance, chatting with sales people and throughout, let's say, 4 or 5 hierarchy levels. And by the way, they came to me, in this case, they came to me and they were complaining to a certain extent. They were saying, look, in the past it was so easy. You were saying something and then we were able to execute it, and now all of a sudden you're asking the people below us what we should do, and they're asking me what they can do. And I said to them, look, this is also new to me. The best is you try it out. And this is, by the way, anyhow, something we did all the time. We tried out new things. We're doing, for instance, failure nights in our company, but we always started small. Always like we initiated everything like an MVP, and then things were growing through or spreading throughout the company, and we follow up. We always follow this up with Yammer, so everyone has access to Yammer and everyone can see what's happening. And I was just showing Linda from most lately, we initiated agile working within our company. We then offered also online courses on concerning agile working. And then all of a sudden I'm seeing then on my iPhone that in various parts of the company, people started to do Scrum sessions. They post the Scrum sessions, others seeing it, others adding ideas to this. And with this, also such an initiative works finally by itself. And so this is what we then did on the corporate side. We developed a couple of tools on the Klöckner.ai in the hub. We developed, for instance, also a marketplace. So we opened this marketplace even for third-party companies, but first of all with complementary products. And then we issued in beginning of this year a second venture, or a real venture. We issued a company we called XOM. This is now the independent marketplace for the steel and metals industry, where also first competitors are selling their products. But this company is now really very far away from Klöckner. So this is really a separate company. And we have a Chinese wall also between Klöckner and this company. And this company, by the way, is also competing with our proprietary marketplaces already. And when this company is successful in the end, so we have meanwhile 40 people here at XOM. We currently started a Series E financing round, so because we really want to make this company independent from Klöckner. But when this is successful, Then, if you like, the value of Klöckner is then really leveraged in this new venture, which will be a completely different company, but which will have finally probably a higher value than Klöckner itself. And by the way, on the corporate itself, we are doing meanwhile 25% of our business is meanwhile online, and which is, I would say, for a steel company pretty much. So we're seeing finally that it works also on the corporate side.
So a couple of just quick observations and questions actually at the same time. One is that it sounds like you've had to lead differently. Your own behavior has changed to help drive this change, and like Vineet sort of described, you've had to use yourself as a role model of showing people that, you know, we can ask questions, we can do things, talk with me, I don't know the answer. So you've changed your own, is that accurate?
Yeah,
your own leadership, and how hard was it for you to learn to lead differently?
Yeah, this is necessary. So I would say I'm since 10 years CEO of Klöckner. I was the respected CEO of the company, so when I said something, then typically it was done. But then I find out when we started with this hierarchy-free communication, I have to communicate in a different way. When, for instance, problems came up, when I would do it like in the past, saying, okay, who has done this? We have to find a solution quickly, and this should not happen again. And it's a failure, and what are our customers saying, and so on. Then this doesn't work in the social network. So what I'm doing now is when problems came up, I'm saying, okay, this is interesting problem. Who has an idea to fix it? So I'm moderating more than to decide immediately. And for instance, I was also through Yammer posting my people a few weeks ago that I expect also now from every employee when something from the management or from their management, when they think that this is not right, that they should object. And but on the other hand, this is also now the case when I'm talking with my people. So I also have to make sure that they object, which they haven't done in the past. So there is, I would say, that when you want to drive this kind of innovation, you have to lead on the one side, the company, no doubt, and you have to make also decisions, but you have to make certain things also different.
So, and lots of other questions we could ask, and we'll go to our last panelist, and then we're going to come back and ask some other questions. Would you be willing to share with us a little bit of your journey at Orange Business Enterprise piece of the puzzle? Thank you.
Good day, everybody. We at Orange Business try to summarize quickly who we are, then what's our journey, and what our challenges are in a very transparent way. Who we are, one could say not a steel company, of course, but you could say it's classical telco. No, we are a global provider of digital services. Orange Business Services is the B2B arm of the Orange Group, a telco group in Europe and Africa, but we are global. We have bought the network of the airlines. That's why we provide services in the telco space, which is about 60% of our business, to customers like Siemens, 1,500 sites across the globe, or the International Red Cross. We do kind of digital services like the cloud for the European Space Agency, or an Internet of Things solution for the biggest fishing fleet company in Vladivostok in Russia, because we happen to be also active in this market. Our challenge is we are spread in 160 countries with our own people, 24,000 people, more than 14,000 are outside of France, which is our home market, and therefore you have all the different aspects of very positively creative people from India, from Egypt, from Brazil, from the Silicon Valley, etc. So what is our journey? We have started our digital journey in 2013, where we gave us the mission, we want to be the trusted partner for our customers' digital transformation. And already then we put customer at the center. To be honest, at this time, retrospectively now, I would say this is where we started to spell how digital is written. We shaped our portfolio a little bit, and we also learned one thing very strongly: digital is not about our technological bricks that we are building for our customers. It's what we call digital with a human touch. It's the human insight, we call it. So we wanted to make sure that what you said as well, Gisbert, that the culture is accompanying this. I'm now the responsible CEO since May this year, but you see it's a journey that we have been doing. And we started off with creating what we call the digital passport. It's all online-based training, so at least you understand what is out there. We had solutions for digital inside the customer, digital outside the customer. And now what we said is, because it's this hierarchy-free discussion, when I became responsible, we said there are 4 key principles we want to work on. I did not say we changed the strategy from A to B. We said there are 4 key principles. 1, customer first. Second one is people empowerment and innovation. The third is simplification, because if you're operating in 160 countries, it sounds super sexy, but it can be awfully complex. And 4th is, of course, the execution of what we have been promising to our stakeholders. Taking customer first, this is, I believe, where innovation should be really starting from. And customer first on our side means customer inside, but also customer outside. And I think it's much easier to start innovation listening to your customers. Make sure you get engaged in your teams, listening to customers. And it's not always the CEO or the CIO in our case that is a key change agent where we can learn from. It is from the customer survey feedbacks, the verbatims that we get back. It is the shop floor manager of a retail store that looks for a new experience in his or her sales process, that you get the right information. So our teams need to listen very carefully on that. So in this digital human touch, we have also one slogan in there, which means listen and respond. To put customer first is very easily said, but it's also an ongoing way where we invite customers to share also their insights to our teams. And then combining the co-innovation. Yesterday we were just opening a big new site in Paris, and we opened up our first digital customer co-innovation center. What we want to create is spaces, or you would call it context, I think some of the panelists before said it, that the teams can really work in this. Together with the customer to create and co-design a certain solution. The aim is that after maximum 2 weeks, we say, okay, this is how we would like to enable his or her business model to change. What are our challenges? Challenges are that life cycle of products historically in telco space has been 1 launch a year or something like this, in the B2C space. Now, in the cloud space, we are pushing out 2 releases per month. Big change for historically a very engineering-driven company. Bear in mind, Orange is still investing every year 600 million in classical R&D. So it's a lot of money. But we are very proud because this is giving us the right insights to take the right long-term decisions as well. And then, in terms of the cultural topic that is there, I see a big difference when I talk to our teams in France, because there we are definitely the market leader. Everybody knows our company. In Germany, your country, in Australia, it's only the big companies who know us. And there is a challenging mindset, a challenger mindset versus the existing mindset. We are the market leader. We know everything. And in this journey we are. And funny enough, because here we talk about innovation, we just launched our new claim at Orange Business Services. This was coming out of those 4 principles, working with the teams. And it's companies thrive on innovation. We work to shape yours. That's our claim vis-a-vis our customers. So it's a journey that will continue very strong.
And a part of that journey for you, and it sounds like for all of you, I know a little bit more about what some of you have been doing than others, is really how to include the customer and co-design and co-create with the customer in a much more intimate kind of relationship. And when I first years ago began doing my work on exceptional leaders of innovation, I looked at eBay. This is early on. And one of the things that they told me at eBay is that most companies weren't really willing to share power with customers. Now you have no choice but to share power with your customers because of the internet. But back then, you didn't really have to. And building a culture inside that can actually share power with the customer, and listen to a customer is not an easy thing given the way organizations have operated. And it sounds like some of your challenge was about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure that the ecosystem is open enough, but also make sure that the good ideas from super talents are not killed by hierarchy.
And one of the other things, and I don't know that this is completely consistent, but in our work on exceptional leaders of innovation, the leaders had a very simple definition of innovation. And it was very simple so that it could be inclusive. And the definition was that innovation was something that was both new and useful in their context. And what was good about this definition, it could be a product, a service, a way of organizing, a way of cutting costs, a new business model, anything. It could be more, quote, every day, or it could be more breakthrough. Now, in choosing the companies that we studied, they had to have done breakthrough innovation. But the leaders really didn't want some people to feel they were special. You're the innovators over here, and the rest of you are the executors. They didn't want that. They didn't want a brick wall. So I think what we hear in your language is that obviously people have different roles in the organization, but you want everyone in the organization to think that they have a part to play in coming up with new ideas. And you don't want to create that brick wall. So sometimes you do need to create it. We create, if you will, the ambidextrous organization, where there is a part that's working on the future in a different way. But fundamentally, everybody in the organization needs to feel that they can play. If not, what you do get is, these people are innovating over here, they're creating a mess that the rest of us have to fix because we have to execute. And useful means that it's actionable and it can be scalable. So I know that this was one of the issues that you really worked with very hard, that for sure value creation came from the front line.
Sure.
The other piece I don't know if any of you would like to talk about is you do need to invest in people. You need to help them learn. And I was once with Vineet in Singapore because I was asked to bring him along, and which was a pleasure because I wanted to hear from the CEO. And you made a comment, Vineet, you said, people worry about how can you afford to invest in the front line like you're doing, because they're very mobile, then they'll leave.
Yeah.
And you said, it's not if you invest and they go, it's if you don't invest and they stay.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the investment it took to get this right?
Yeah, I think, Linda, you're making a very important point. When we keep on saying listening to customer, we must understand who are we listening to and who's listening to customers. So HCL grew to 100,000 employees, and therefore you're saying that top management, 6,000 of us listening customer doesn't really work. So what we did was we created a digital interface between the customer and the employee. So we created a portal, and we said all employees are expected to innovate, and they'll come up with innovative ideas, small ideas. They'll put it on a portal. Only the customer can give it points. And the points you collect, depending on, it's a 5-point scale, the points you collect over the year will get monetized at the end of the year. So every point would be X dollars. So suddenly there is a humongous amount of innovation which was coming up at the grassroots level, and the customer was rating whether the innovation was right or wrong. Then we democratized the innovation and saying, okay, now that we have these series of innovation, the teams will nominate and vote in terms of what is the best innovation. So the best innovation started coming in, and then we created a democracy where you can combine a couple of innovation and compete against another team. So slowly these innovative ideas democratically will coming together till they reach the national level. The top 20 teams, we invested $1 million each in them. So the democratization of innovation coming from grassroots level, believing that the ears and eyes of the company is actually the employees. And if you truly want to create a unique customer experience, you cannot do it without creating a unique employee experience. It is only after you are committed to creating a unique employee experience would your employees create a unique customer experience. Therefore, the business of management is employees first, and the business of employees is customer first.
Thank you. Any other reactions to, just want to get you all ask some questions of each other, or thoughts that you've had as you've listened to each other?
Yeah, I mean, just on this training, obviously, especially also in our company, this digital training is very important because digital is very vague and everyone talks about it, but what is it exactly? And we've launched in our Mondi Academy, we've launched now digital courses, but what we did do differently this time is that first our extended exco has to attend the courses. So which is a bit tough from time commitment perspective, but it's necessary because we have to learn the basics, so to say, or the somewhat advanced basics.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we, by the way, our digital academy was also kind of MVP at the beginning. We started within 3 weeks with our first courses. And, but what was important was, I think, the decision that, so first of all, it's voluntary. It's voluntary in our case. And secondly, all our employees, as mentioned, have the right to do this during working hours. They can do it also at home when they're doing home office, but they can do it during working hours. But on the other side, I said to our people, look, with artificial intelligence, going forward, all jobs will change, and also especially repetitive tasks will be done by artificial intelligence going forward. So when you want to stay with the company, finally, you have to have digital know-how. Without digital know-how, it will not work. So this is then so it's also a bit pressure on one side, but it's voluntary on the other side. And we're saying, look, the people who are doing this and who are engaging themselves in this digital academy, they have a future within the company, but we are also clearly saying the ones who are not interested in digitalization, for them it's better to look for a job somewhere else. So that is how
helping prepare them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Building on the artificial intelligence.
Building on this artificial intelligence, in the end, I believe that more and more innovation will be enabled by digital, but the creativity is still the human side of it to be created. So it's going to be people-driven, but it's going to be enabled via digital. And I think it's not only a question in terms of innovation about the IQ, and we know that Peter F. Drucker used this term, knowledge worker. We strongly believe in this context. It's a question of IQ, of course. I mean, we have fantastic brains, sometimes even prima donnas in terms of knowledge, what they have. But it's also the EQ, how you can interrelate, and this can be internal innovation or customer innovation. And then, of course, also I would say gender Q, to make sure that you're really diverse, to make sure that you see it also with different eyes. And we are amazed about the degree of passion, for example, that young Egyptian ladies or young Mauritius, from our services centers there, what they contribute. And it's not that we know more than these emerging markets. They come with fantastic ideas. Yeah?
So ordinary people doing extraordinary things because you've created a space where they can work together, and of course no one's ordinary. Yes.
They have to, waiting to be discovered.
Yes, just be discovered. So what we found actually when we looked at leaders who created organizations that could innovate is in some ways they didn't worry as much about being the visionary. They worried more about setting the stage.
Sure.
As Ed Catmull, who's the CEO of Pixar, you've heard about, is one of the people that I've had the privilege of studying. And so you set the stage for people to be willing and able by creating the culture and the capabilities necessary for them to be able to collaborate and go on these discovery learning journeys. Now, one thing we've talked about failure a bit, or things that didn't work as well. I think as long as you learn, you want to be learning as you're doing this. One of the things we heard was, it was very challenging to help people learn that you can make reasonable missteps. One of my colleagues distinguishes between blameworthy failures and praiseworthy failures, and how important is you do that if you're going to create the psychological safety for people to speak up, to share the ideas, etc. So in terms of, one of the things I wanted to ask you next, because looking at the time, is how do you go about selecting leaders? Or selecting, I shouldn't say leadership can be done by anyone, but when you're promoting people, how do you think about promotions now, given that you know you need to build an organization that can innovate, that can be agile? Are you using different criteria? Are you thinking of giving them different kinds of developmental experiences to prepare them to be able to lead in the kind of world we're living in now? Don't know who would like to start.
So what we did, but already 3 years ago, management appraisal survey, and then we dismissed management, which was in this case red. So we had this ample green, yellow, red, and the red ones were the ones who don't want to change anything, and who are also don't have the ability to change anything. And the yellow ones, they got coaches. Most of them were, by the way, yellow ones. So we only had a very few green ones, and we coached all the yellow ones. And we also got in people from outside, but most of our people also on the management levels are from inside. So we are not, and it would not be possible, I would say, in our organization, or when we would have said, okay, we have now to change, let's say, 50 or 60% of our leadership, because we are also, to a certain extent, this ambidextrous organization. So we have to make sure that the current business is also as a public company, that the current business works and that we also working on the future. We have to do both at the same time, and therefore we need also, best of all is when you have a management team, I would say in our case, which is able to do both, which has ideas how Klöckner might look in the future and who can work on this, but who are also able to manage the current business. Because when we fail in the current business, as a public company, we will probably not be able to work on our future anymore.
Yeah, getting that balance right. So yes, I know that, and Peter, then we'll come back to you.
One point about the acceptance of failure. This is where I really admire Silicon Valley. I think what the big difference to Silicon Valley to us Europeans, or for example in our company, is we are always very proud that we do everything perfectly. So when we do a new product specification, we want to write it until the 65th page after 4 months, and then we are very proud because we have thought of everything. Where we need and we want to change is to learn faster together with the customer. That's why those customer digital innovation labs, because I think this is where the US startups are very good at, is to try and test very fast and then to pivot if needed and to say, well, this hasn't worked, etc. And there is a degree in our European-centric culture to be more, we have to avoid mistakes, which I think we need to open up to accept this much better. In terms of talent selection, we have specifically a program which we call the leadership program, and we have now introduced as well talents or leaders below 30 years, just to look at the next generation of digitally native born leaders already. Yeah.
So while Peter is going to answer, I'm technically challenged. This is not giving me any questions, so if you've been sending them, we have one by hand here, but Peter, why don't you answer? And I don't know what I'm doing wrong with this, but can I get one of you to help me with the iPad so I'm not leaving out people? But Peter, why don't you answer? You had a comment, and then I'll take questions. Okay.
Yeah, so on talent management, that's something we've spent a lot of time on to get it right. So it's not black and white that we look now for different people, but we saw we need to change the mix. So we place, we are more specific for different functions, and in terms of its curiosity, learning, living with ambiguance, these are the things we look much more at. So that's one thing, and the other thing is diversity. And I would put at diversity is, of course, diversity, gender, nationalities, race, etc. But the main thing is diversity of opinion. So you need this. You need different types. So especially in a company like ours, you had a lot of certain types. And now we have to broaden up, which makes life more complicated. If you're a leader at whatever level, your comfort zone goes much more down, because now you have more diverse teams. But that's exactly what we need.
Yeah, one of the things for sure is you very rarely get innovation without diversity and conflict.
Yeah.
So that is an important piece of capability that you need to develop as an organization. Just having the diversity but not being able to embrace it, obviously doesn't work so well either.
On conflict, we are doing well.
On conflict, good. You're doing well on conflict. Well, politeness is one of the, can certainly kill innovation. Yes.
Yeah. So I think in HCL, the experiment was quite simple because we had this 360-degree survey, which about 8,000 managers were participating. The employee feedback automatically selected the right leaders, and the right leaders got up. And interestingly, we found that all the popular leaders who would take their teams out for dinners and bars would have the lowest rating, and all the obstinate leaders who had a lot of conflict will get the highest rating. But when we moved to Sampark Foundation, Linda, something interesting happened in terms of we could not find people who will go to remote villages to try and work. And then we went to IIT. IITs are the premier engineering institutions in the country, and told them that why don't you work with 2 years and we're going to give you a kind of experience which you have not heard from. So the leaders got created because of the purpose. And a very interesting thing happened on innovation, which is the unintended consequences. So when we went to these 7 million children in 76,000 schools, the learning outcome dramatically improved. We gave them one workbook designed by an IT engineer with QR codes, which they can access videos, the children can access videos. And interestingly, when we went to schools, we found that those workbooks which we gave to the children never came to the school. They were left behind in the houses, and we called it a big failure. Until this kid came and says, Vineet, just wait, watch. What is happening is when the workbooks are home, the web links are peaking. That means somebody is accessing the workbook from home and using the workbooks. That's the mothers. So it became the biggest adult literacy program. It was meant to be a biggest child literacy, primary education literacy. It became the biggest adult literacy. So it's very important to hire people whose purpose is aligned. Number two, to listen to them, because sometimes innovation gets created out of unintended consequences.
Yes, for sure. So we have a question here, if I can.
My name is Peter Mitterbauer from MIBA. I have a question to Gisbert Rühl. You mentioned about Klöckner I basically disrupting to a certain extent in parallel your existing business, or at least it has the potential. How do you deal in motivating the incumbent organization, that it's not a sunset organization and the new guys being in Berlin then taking over? So apparently those guys in Berlin, I think they are motivated, startup feeling, digital born. But how do you motivate and how do you explain the incumbent organization about this change and about their personal futures?
Yeah, we in Berlin, so we have on the one side Klöckner.ai, and Klöckner.ai, in the beginning we wanted to open Klöckner.ai, or the marketplace we developed at Klöckner.ai, also for competitors. This failed because it was too difficult to communicate this internally. Our people internally finally, even if they rationally were thinking that might be right when you want to be successful with a platform, that competitors should have access to this platform too. And that this platform also takes a certain % of the margin, but emotionally that doesn't work. And therefore then we decided to launch this new venture, XOM, which is completely independent and with a different management and with a Chinese wall to Klöckner itself. So we moved Klöckner.ai closer to Klöckner. So the people at Klöckner.ai working very close. They are still independent, but they're working very close together with our corporate side. And people from the corporate are also from time to time in Berlin for 3 months and working together with Klöckner.ai. So there is, I would say, meanwhile, a good relationship between this. We still have different people. No? So we still have this digital people in Berlin and the corporate guys on the other side. But the disruptive part, this is something which is too difficult to accept for the corporate, that there is all of a sudden a platform which is taking the margin and which is and where the competitor of today is the customer all of a sudden, and therefore. We clearly did it separately. And meanwhile, by the way, there is already competition between this XOM platform and our marketplace. As they competing for the same customers and for the same vendors, and we have customers who buying from both. And Klöckner itself has to be able to sell finally through all this kind of channels, so to this more proprietary channels, but also then to the industry platform, and maybe to something else, maybe also to Amazon in the future. So there will be this competition between the platforms, and Klöckner itself has to be able to sell to all kind of platforms.
So I've learned I have another technology challenge. I'm looking at a clock that tells me we have 4 minutes and 17 seconds, but we do not. So we are apparently over time. But you all are all seeing what I'm saying, right? Okay.
Yes.
So I want to thank
seeing
the
is not
panel.
believing.
Yes. And I want to say one of the things we see in transformation, any kind, is that you have to change people's head, their hearts, and their hands. And we've heard some examples of each. The head is the hardest part in some ways. The why, really helping people understand that. Perhaps one of the most profound, for me, things that a leader said to me about innovation, he says, Linda, innovation is a voluntary act. And so if, in fact, you're trying to lead an organization that can innovate, you must understand that as a leader, you're leading an organization of volunteers. And how do you create a space where these individuals will want to volunteer to do the work that is necessary? And for most of us as leaders, we don't think of ourselves, particularly in the private sector, of leading organizations of volunteers because we're paying the people. But fundamentally, your formal authority makes no difference whatsoever to whether or not they're going to be willing to innovate. Thank you very much for your point of view. Sorry I ended up cutting us off. I thought we had the 4 minutes, but I hope we've all learned some insights, and it's a pleasure to know all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.